need to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Many would have us believe that the ERA has always been a battle led and fought by white women. It's always been a battle, a white woman's battle for white women's gain. But as is so often the case, this is a false narrative. We've seen this throughout history, an effort to erase the women of color who have served as trailblazers, table shakers, and justice seekers in the fight for gender equality. So allow me to bring my ancestors into this room. More than 70 years ago, Black suffragists, civil rights activists, and first president of the National Association of Colored People, of colored women rather, Mary Church Terrell testified before this House in support of the ERA. In 1970, Pauli Murray, a revolutionary Black queer lawyer and scholar, testified before the Senate Judiciary and reminded legislators that Black women had the most to gain by passing the ERA. She famously said, quote, "I suggest that what the opponents of the amendment fear is not equal rights, but equal power and responsibility," unquote. Senator McClellan, you also mentioned that women of color have the most to gain by achieving constitutional equality. Can you give us some specific examples of what you mean?
Yes, and thank you, because again, it gives me an opportunity to address some misconceptions about why women, and particularly women of color, have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Women of color tend to be dominating professions that are essential workers, because for many years, those were the only opportunities available to those women, and there are generational impacts because of that. Those women did not, in many cases, have access to insurance, health insurance. They did not have access to childcare. They did not have the same economic opportunities as their male or white counterparts. And many of them, when they got pregnant, were in jobs where they had to make a choice between immediately returning back to work because they were not given sufficient time off to recover or bond with their child. And in many cases, if their husband was in the picture, they were not granted enough time off to be the primary caregiver. So these are all generational results that go back to slavery and Jim Crow that have not been eliminated with a magic wand just because Jim Crow laws ended. And the ERA will allow Congress and states to pass laws to redress some of that.
Thank you. And certainly we've seen those inequities exacerbated during the pandemic since, again, many of those essential and low-wage jobs are dominated by women of color, frontline jobs who put themselves at risk and could not zoom into work. I want to turn to a particular right that has been the center of a lot of discussion in Congress and the Supreme Court and in many states throughout the country, and that's the right to safe and legal abortion care. Across the United States, pregnant people of color experience systemic health inequities as a result of centuries of policy violence, including barriers to health insurance, greater stigma, and heightened stress caused by racism. This is certainly true in my district, the Massachusetts 7th, and for many others around the nation. Senator McClellan, can you explain that the role abortion care plays in advancing health and economic equity for historically marginalized communities, and how you've seen that play out for your constituents in Virginia specifically?
Yes, the Supreme Court has long recognized that reproductive freedom is central to one's equality. As the court said in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the ability of women to participate equally in the economic and social life of the nation has been facilitated by their ability to control their reproductive lives. Abortion is health care, and the ERA is about gender equality in access to health care and the workplace and in school and every aspect of federal and state law and policy. And in particular, Black women have been disproportionately discriminated on the basis of pregnancy, and the ERA would also help with that. And as we have seen states begin to threaten access to abortion, the ERA can help.
That's right. It can help protect our right to bodily autonomy and to advance reproductive freedom, especially for the most vulnerable and marginalized. Professor Norris, at a moment when abortion bans like Texas's SB 8 are threatening pregnant people's right to health care, why are the constitutional protections of the ERA particularly important?
They're particularly important.
Gentlelady's time has expired, but you may answer the question.
They're particularly important because the current court has shown itself to be rather sympathetic to the point that the right to privacy is not in the Constitution, and therefore, without actual text, without a text of the ERA, it may well be that the court reverses Roe versus Wade.